I'm good. Talk amongst yourselves. All right. To move forward tonight, Greg, our chef, is out here to talk about the first course, and we have Cameron Russell, who is the beer specialist, I believe this title is, from Heidelberg Distributing, to talk about the different victory beers. So we'll let Greg get started with food, and then Cameron will take over with the beer.
The first course with the wheat beer, Jason loves beets. I love beets.
I hated beets until I had Greg's beets the first time at one of the beer dinners. Now I love
Sounds wrong. So it's a salad. It's a salad. I got baby arugula, some golden beets, Asian pears, and toasted almonds, and I made a dressing with orange juice, a little rice wine vinegar, a little bit of sugar, and just salt and pepper. It's really simple, but it should go great with this beer. The greens are arugula, that's a little bit bitter, but I think you'll like it. That's very good.
Once again, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Thank you guys, Bob, Garrett, everybody for hosting me this evening. I represent Heidelberg Distributing Company, which we distribute Victory beers. So I can speak a little bit on the history of the brewing, and then as well as get into the beers that we're going to be serving throughout the evening. To give you guys a little bit of background on Victory Brewing Company as it was formed, there's two gentlemen that started the company, Ron Barchett and Bill Kowaleski, and they are two lifelong friends. And it's kind of a really cool story how they got hooked up and kind of grew this business together. They actually met each other going into 5th grade on a school bus, transferring schools. And from that moment forward, they stayed in constant contact. They were, like once again, best friends, lifelong friends. And as it worked out, they stayed in touch throughout college. And one of them went to UCLA, one of them stayed local in Pennsylvania. And throughout the entire time, they found a similar love of beer as well, microbrew beer to be specific. And once they both got back in touch on the East Coast, they decided, hey, let's get into home brewing. So they started home brewing. That love of home brewing then, once again, as a giant snowball rolling downhill, they decided, let's go out to Great American Beer Fest and, experience what the true epic of, pinnacle, so to speak, of American craft beer is. And while they were there, they had both their copies of the Pocket Guide to Beer written by Michael Jackson, who, if you don't know, in light of recent events, the Michael Jackson that's familiar within the beer world is considered to be the foremost beer expert. That has nothing to do with the Michael Jackson that we all know from pop culture. Michael Jackson through beer world is a completely different person. And he signed both of their pocket guides to beer with the inscription, brew good beer, go start a pub, cheers, Michael Jackson. And amazingly enough, within 4 years of that, they were starting to formulate how to start their own brewery. The kernel started with that little meeting there at Great American Beer Fest, and from that moment forward, once again, it started to germinate. They really started to come up with their ideas of how they wanted to do this. New Year's Eve of 1994, while they were sharing drinks, they approached their wives and said, hey, look, what would you say? Would you think we're crazy if we decided we want to start a brewery? The wives were fully into it, so next thing you know, that's when they started to form the paperwork in order to make this thing happen. And once they did that, they purchased a abandoned bakery and cleared it completely out, brought in all their brewing equipment, and then to make a long story short, within a few months they started operating. And flash forward 14 years, now here we are, and Victory is distributed in over half the United States, and they are now distributed overseas as well into the United Kingdom. For those of us that are in the know within the industry, that's an exponential growth rate within 14, 15 years. To see things like that happen is amazing. And each of these brews that they do, they're committed to not only stylistic representations, meaning that they try to adhere as strictly as possible to what they're supposed to taste like, but they also do a great job in terms of making quality beer, and they do a great job in terms of making sure that each of these beers, not only, as I said, are stylistically correct in quality, but they do a good job in terms of making each one of these beers as readily available as possible. So that's one of the best things about my job, is the fact that as a distributor, I never have to worry about, is this beer going to not be available, or is this beer going to be available? So each of these beers should be readily available when you come out into the marketplace. If they're not here, you can find them in other places, 6-packs, bottles, whatever you may call it. So moving forward now in terms of where we're looking at pairing up the beers with the dishes that we're in front of you right now. With the Whirlwind Wit Beer, for those of you that aren't completely familiar with how wit beers are supposed to taste, and you're more accustomed to so-called, macro beers, think of a Bugard and think of how those beers taste, and that's basically a generic, so to speak, representation of what a wit beer truly is. A wit beer, 9 times out of 10, it's brewed completely with raw wheat and malted barley, and the wheat overtakes the barley in terms of how the grain bill is built. So you're going to get some of that crispness, you're going to get some of that real creaminess from the wheat. Also incorporated in this brewing process becomes spices, usually coriander, curacao orange peel, and grains of paradise. Those are the typical 3 ones, and then each brewer, depending on who the brewer is, adds their own special brand of special seasonings and spices that they don't disclose to everyone else, because that's part of the beauty of brewing. It's similar to Colonel Sanders and his secret recipe. So with this beer, you're going to notice really light, crisp flavors, and it's going to blend into, once again, those signature spices. So I think, as Greg described the salad, I think it's going to pair up very nicely. I think it's going to go really well. There's really not a lot of hoppy bitterness to this beer at all. As I said, you're going to notice a lot more crisp, clean tastes, and it's going to pair really well with the food. So thank you guys. Enjoy the first course.